October 2009, the Jameson family lived in the town of Eufaula, Oklahoma, and consisted of Bobby, his wife Sherry Lynn, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison and dog Macy. On October 8th, they loaded their pickup truck and headed into Oklahoma's Sands Boys Mountains. The family traveled 30 miles to a 40-acre plot of land that they were thinking of buying in an area called Red Oak. The plan was to live off-grid in a storage shed that they owned until they could build on the land. They visited an associate of the landowner, and when the meeting was done, the family went for a short walk for about 15 minutes. GPS from the phone showed that they walked away from the truck, took a picture of Madison in the remote area, and then returned to the truck not long after. After they returned to their vehicle, they drove a little further and then, with the truck left locked in the middle of a dirt track, they vanished. 9 days later, on October 17th, hunters came across the Jamesons' abandoned truck northwest of Red Oak and called police to report the vehicle because it had a dog locked inside. They quickly rescued the thirsty and Mount Irish dog. The truck was about an hour's drive from the Jamesons' home in Eufaula. The family was nowhere to be seen despite a large search of the area around the truck. The sheriff at first thought that the truck had been stolen, but soon realized something far more serious had taken place. He launched one of the largest search operations in Oklahoma history. It consisted of 1,000 volunteers, 13 dog teams, helicopters, horses, mules, ATVs, and an unmanned drone, and they found nothing. During the searches, the cadaver dog teams repeatedly found scent near a nearby water tower, which was then drained and searched, but nothing was found. Police searched the truck and found Bobby and Sherilyn's cell phones, $32,000 in cash in a bank bag under the seat, maps, a GPS, Sherilyn's purse, wallets, and empty pill bottles. The vehicle was in working order, had fuel, and hadn't been in an accident. The only thing missing was a brown briefcase and the .22 caliber gun that Sherry Lynn was known to keep in the truck. The $32,000 in cash was puzzling because the couple were both on disability at the time. Some wonder if it was to buy the land or something more sinister like drug dealing. In the truck, investigators found an 11-page hate letter from Sherry Lynn to Bobby where she claimed he didn't care about his daughter. She listed all the things she hated about him, including that he was a loner and a hermit and that she wanted a divorce. During their initial investigations, police found no signs of a struggle in the vehicle nor on the soft ground around the truck. There was no blood, but their belongings were strewn about the truck. Also, it was parked in such a way that it appeared that they were leaving and were stopped by somebody. About a week after the truck was found and identified, investigators searched the family home. They came upon an extensive outside surveillance system which was less common in 2009 than it is today. Some speculate this was due to a drug ring, but their family said it was due to Bobby's father often threatening him and they were afraid and that the couple were not involved in illegal drugs. However, they did say the couple had lost an unhealthy amount of weight. Video surveillance from the day the family left the home was reviewed. The video shows Bobby and Sherry Lynn walking back and forth around 30 times from their house to their truck loading items. Sometimes they weren't even carrying anything at all, and they even changed clothes multiple times. They were seen putting things in the truck and then returning it to the house and then back to the truck. It gets even stranger because at times they would stop and stand with a blank look on their faces. A psychologist reviewed the footage and stated that the couple appeared to be on drugs. 6 years earlier in 2003, Bobby had a car accident that left him with chronic back pain and on painkillers. Sherry Lynn suffered from bipolar disorder but was non-compliant with her meds, so she often experienced bouts of severe depression and anger issues. Her mother said that her mental state declined 2 years prior when her sister passed away. Also, the marriage was said to be intramural and the family kept to themselves. Bobby and Sherry Lynn had spoken to a local pastor about their belief that their home was invaded by dark spirits and that an exorcism might be needed. This was because Madison had started talking to an imaginary friend named Emily, and Sherry Lynn believed Emily was actually a malevolent entity. At one point, Bobby asked the pastor if he knew where he could purchase special bullets to shoot a handful of spirits, whom he said were living on the roof of the family's home. Bobby was also planning on trying to exorcise the spirits in the home with the help of a copy of the Satanic Bible that he had purchased and Sherry Lynn on a witch's Bible. All 3 members of the family said they often saw spirits in the home and Sherry Lynn was a self-proclaimed witch. A friend of Sherry Lynn's told the police that she sometimes conducted seances with Sherry Lynn, though Sherry Lynn took them much more seriously than she did. Both friends and family agreed with the Jamesons that their home was haunted, and a few have shared that they too experienced odd things inside the house. Sherry Lynn's best friend, Nikki, said when she visited the home, she felt a horrible presence and would leave feeling down and depressed. Sherry Lynn had also written graffiti on their storage container that they planned to live in about her black cats being poisoned, as she believed that someone from the neighborhood had killed her cats. One read, 3 cats killed to date by people in this area. Another read, witches don't like their black cat killed. Sherry Lynn believed that her neighbors had been poisoning their cats, so she wrote on the container to scare them off. A series of events occurred throughout 2009 that took a toll on the family. Madison suffered an injury at school from a swing, which resulted in Bobby and Sherry Lynn pulling Madison out of school and filing a lawsuit against the school. In July 2009, Sherry Lynn's ex-husband from her first marriage took custody of their son Colton. And in September, Sherry Lynn was hospitalized following a failed suicide attempt. During the custody hearing, 12-year-old Colton said he would prefer to live with his dad. And he gave a statement about his mother claiming that she had seemed very depressed, and that she often acted strangely. Finally, in August, they dealt with a maintenance man by the name of Kenneth Bellows, who was also a family friend who lived with the family in exchange for helping around the house due to Bobby's deteriorating physical condition. Sherry Lynn's relationship with Kenneth took a turn for the worst when he found out about her Native American heritage because he was a white supremacist. She allegedly shot into the ground next to his feet and ordered him to leave. However, he was in jail at the time the family disappeared. For years later, on November 16, 2013, less than 3 miles from where the truck was located, deer hunters discovered the skeletal remains of 2 adults and 1 child. They were in the Smokestack Hollow area of Panola Mountain. The bodies were found lined up side by side with their faces down. Forensic testing confirmed 8 months later that the remains were Bobby, Sherry Lynn, and Madison Jamison. Investigators found a flower lying next to Madison's body in the remote area. When questioned why the initial searches did not locate their bodies, police stated that falling leaves potentially obscured the bodies. Some speculate whether the bodies were actually missed during one of the largest searches in Oklahoma history or were they placed there later. Due to only being skeletal remains, a cause of death could not be determined. However, the coroner did find a small hole in Bobby's skull that might have been from a bullet, but neither Sherry Lynn nor Madison had any gunshot evidence. The coroner said that it could also have been caused by animal activity, but some people disagree with this. The gun that was possibly used to kill Bobby was never found. Sherry Lynn's mother, Connie, claims her daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter were on an Oklahoma cult hit list. Connie didn't provide the name of the alleged cult, nor have police found any links to one, but it is allegedly a white supremacist cult, and it was thought that the man that Sherry Lynn had a falling out with over her heritage put a hit out on the family. The area of Oklahoma where the Jamonsons lived, as well as the area they were hoping to move to in the Sans Bois Mountains, is well known for Matthews. Bobby had recently reported someone in the local area for running a meth lab prior to their murders. One theory is that the Jamisons came upon illegal drug activity, saw more than they were supposed to, and were killed to keep them quiet. But why didn't the dealers search the truck and take the valuables? After a search of the house, police found no drug paraphernalia and no evidence they were taking meth or any other illegal substances. Another theory by many is that the family was killed by Bobby's father, Bob Dean Jameson. The family had filed a protective order against him, claiming that he had threatened to kill them over some business dealings. In the protective order filed in April 2009, Bobby alleged that his father had intentionally hit him with his car on November 1, 2008, and that he was a very dangerous man who thinks he is above the law, and that he was involved in prostitutes, gangs, meth, and even the Mexican mafia. Bobby and his father had a long-running feud regarding the proceeds from the sale of a gas station. Bobby accused his father of reneging on an agreement to give him half the proceeds from the sale. Bobby's father died 2 months after the family went missing, and police ruled him out as a suspect. Bobby's uncle said that Bob Dean was a disturbed individual, but not capable of murder. When police examined Bobby's phone from the truck, they found a final picture of Madison taken up on the mountain. The family's pastor, Gary Brandon, told police during the initial investigation that the family had been involved in spiritual warfare from what Sherry Lynn said was the spirits of a long-dead family that was living with them. The remains of an old abandoned vehicle were found near where the family truck was found. It was used for shooting practice by locals, and written on it were satanic messages. Police ruled out murder-suicide because no gun was located at the scene, although Sherry Lynn could have shot Bobby, hid the gun, and then poisoned herself and her daughter. The question still remains: what happened to the brown briefcase the couple was seen loading into their truck that day? Some think they got lost and succumbed to the elements, but why were their bodies not found during the search? With Bobby's bad back, it's doubtful they would have planned to go on a long hike or adventure. The medical examiner ruled their cause of death as inconclusive, and the case has become one of America's most bizarre mysteries. After many years, the question still remains: were they murdered, lost in the woods, or was it a murder-suicide? The case of Chris Watts. Shannon Razusek and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shannon was from Aberdeen, and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris' parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Shannon and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shannon and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shannon had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shannon defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shannon was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Shannon was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Shannon expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shannon's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shannon worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Shannon had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Shannon loved her job, and it showed. As her coworker Cynthia DeRosette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Shannon had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and 2 daughters. In spring 2018, Shannon got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction, so she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Shannon was having a baby boy. Shannon and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Shannon was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina, while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Shannon took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece, without considering Shannon's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Shannon was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Shannon expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions and that Shannon's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Shannon was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Shannon and their 2 daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Sean N was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Sean N felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Sean N felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Sean N sent a heartbreaking text to her friend, explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. Sean N suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Sean N too much to do that. But Sean N was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Sean N, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Sean N that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Sean N was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Sean N proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Sean N was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Sean N came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Sean N soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shanann's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Sean N opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Sean N was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris' account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Sean N returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Sean N entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shanann's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Sean N missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Sean N, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shanann's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Sean N would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shanann's friends contacted her husband Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Sean N might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shanann's friends were puzzled by Chris's response because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Sean N was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Sean N and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shanann's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Sean and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Sean and Chris's home, the officer found Shanann's purse, which contained her medication and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shanann's friend Nicole, but Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shanann's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. A camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shanann's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Sean or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Sean hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shanann's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Sean might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Sean and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Sean during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Sean and, to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Sean. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Sean and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shanann's safety, they held onto the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Sean was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Sean emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Wood's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Sean but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shanann's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Sean was eagerly awaiting the birth of her 3rd child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shanann's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Sean was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Sean and in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shanann's body in his truck and drove to his work site with their 2 daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. Let us travel back to October 22, 1984, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the city was left in disbelief as 18-year-old Annette Craver vanished without a trace. The police, determined to unravel the truth, scoured the area, but their efforts were in vain, and the whereabouts of the teenage married girl remained a haunting mystery. While the mystery of her disappearance loomed large, the police suspected that it wasn't just a simple disappearing act, but a terrifying case of homicide. This situation was considerably more twisted than initially apparent. A man was at the center of it all, and his twisted mindset would triumph over the quest for justice for an incredible 54 years, until justice finally succeeded. What could have happened to young Annette? Who was this psychopath? And why did it take so long to unravel the truth behind this haunting case? As we delve into this chilling case, we will also lead you through 2 other haunting mysteries intricately connected to this story. Tulsa, Oklahoma is a captivating city with a unique blend of modernity and tradition. Nestled in the heart of the United States, this metropolis offers a dynamic lifestyle enriched by its diverse cultural scene. Tulsa is renowned for its well-preserved Art Deco architecture, thriving performing arts scene, and mouth-watering Oklahoma-style barbecue joints. Additionally, the city holds fame for its significant history in oil production and proudly stands as the birthplace for the iconic Route 66. Despite its successes, Tulsa has had its struggles with crime. In 2020, the city's violent crime rate surpassed the national average, elevating it to one of the cities with some of the highest crime rates in the U.S., adding to the city's darker side. Annette Craver's mysterious disappearance also occurred within Tulsa. Born on December 7, 1965, in Houston, Texas, Annette Michelle Craver's early years remained relatively shrouded in mystery. However, a significant turning point occurred when her father tragically lost his life in a car crash in 1979. The heartbreaking event took a toll on Annette's emotional well-being. Her mother, Mary Rose, observed a notable change in Annette's behavior, noting that she grew increasingly withdrawn and often sought solace in solitude. Deep within her heart, Mary held the understanding that her cherished daughter had been grappling with immense difficulties following the loss of her father. On September 8, 1981, a significant event occurred as Mary orchestrated a yard sale in Houston to part with her late husband's belongings. Annette, then 15 years old, actively assisted her mother in the sale. Despite her silence regarding her feelings, it was evident that Annette was far from having moved past the profound loss of her father. But Mary didn't realize that Annette wasn't actually feeling lonely. Unbeknownst to Mary, Annette had been involved with a man whose charm was coupled with a significant age gap. He was not only older than Annette, but even surpassed her mother's age. It was during the yard sale that Mary had her first encounter with Annette's friend, 40-year-old Felix Vale. As he approached Annette to engage in conversation, observing the notable age difference, Mary remained unsuspecting, never entertaining the notion that something more was going on. In the aftermath of Annette's father's demise, Mary grappled with the weight of financial hardships. The task of securing employment in Houston proved elusive, prompting her to consider relocating in pursuit of better opportunities to provide for her daughter. Following a series of challenges, Mary's determination bore fruit as she secured a job offer in the state of Oklahoma. However, a significant concern remained. Annette, who had already missed 2 years of school, was on the verge of graduating high school. Mary understood that relocating abruptly to a different state could jeopardize her daughter's academic process. Faced with this dilemma, Mary opted for a solution. She reached out to a friend seeking assistance in caring for Annette, while she made the move to Oklahoma to secure employment. While the plan initially appeared sound, it soon began to unravel for Mary. As time passed, a growing concern emerged. Annette and Felix's relationship seemed to have intensified in her absence. Mary couldn't shake off her unease as she observed the 40-year-old man becoming increasingly intertwined in her underage daughter's life, a situation that deeply troubled her. After Annette's high school graduation, Mary's diligent savings allowed her to purchase a new house. With the dream of living together once again, she registered the house under both their names. However, upon her return to Houston, Mary discovered that Annette had already left. Dashing her hopes of a long-awaited reunion, Mary learned that when Annette graduated, Felix swiftly proposed a road trip to her, and captivated by his charm, she readily agreed to his proposal. Over time, in 1983, Mary did receive sporadic letters from Annette, each from a different location. Then, one day a call arrived from her daughter, who was then in California. Mary felt a surge of joy hearing from Annette, but the conversation soon took a stressful turn. Annette, who was just 17 back then, sought her mother's approval to marry Felix Vale. Knowing that there was a chance of losing her daughter, who was deeply involved with Felix, Mary struggled with the difficult choice that lay ahead. It was clear that saying no would come with its own consequences, yet arriving at a choice was far from straightforward. With a heavy heart, Mary ultimately made the difficult choice to allow Annette to marry Felix. However, the idyllic married life that Annette had envisioned would soon begin to crumble. Shortly after their marriage, Annette confided in her mother through heartfelt letters. She revealed that Felix had undergone a troubling transformation, turning increasingly controlling. Shockingly, she shared that Felix had even coerced her into undergoing an illegal abortion following her pregnancy with his child. Consumed by fear for her daughter's well-being, Mary implored Annette to return home without delay. Eventually, in 1984, Annette found the courage to break free from Felix's hold and found her way back to her mother. However, upon laying eyes on her daughter, Mary couldn't help but recognize that her beloved daughter had changed. Despite the heartbreak, Mary made attempts to mend the situation with Annette, but her efforts were in vain. Annette remained firmly under Felix's influence, impervious to any other perspective. Thus, with a heavy heart, Mary relinquished her share of the house, gathered her belongings, and moved to California. However, that was not the end of the nightmare. As Annette reached the age of 18, she took a significant step by accessing the inheritance left by her deceased father. Shockingly, she allegedly transferred all the funds into Felix's account, and also transferred ownership of her house to his name. Upon learning of this alarming development, Mary wasted no time and immediately contacted Felix. On October 22, 1984, upon receiving the missing person report, the Tulsa police swiftly approached Felix Vale in an attempt to obtain any possible information. Regrettably, much like Annette, the police too fell victim to Felix's manipulation. Mary strongly suspected that Felix played a crucial part in Annette's disappearance and was hiding the truth. However, despite her convictions, the police were swayed by Felix's words, leading them to abandon the search for Annette Craver Vale. Left with no options, the mother found herself in a state of helplessness, clinging to a resolute belief that her daughter would one day return. By 1991, a staggering 7 years had elapsed with no breakthrough in locating Annette. Mary tried to reach out to the police by sending them hundreds of letters, but neither the police nor the FBI was interested in responding to her. Even the letters she sent to Felix were left unanswered. Mary came to the stark realization that relying on others would yield no results. Driven by her determination, she resolved to undertake an investigation on her own. Convinced that Felix held a key to Annette's disappearance, Mary initially attempted to gather information about him through the fledgling resources of the internet. Yet during the 1990s, online information was far from abundant. Through her unwavering research, Mary managed to secure a solitary but significant lead: Felix's sister, Sue Jordan. Fueled by hope and the prospect of uncovering crucial information, Mary embarked on a journey that spanned halfway across the country to meet with her. Armed with this darling revelation, Mary swiftly managed to trace the family of Felix's first wife, Mary Horton Vale, in Louisiana during 1993. Her efforts bore fruit as she successfully located Mary Horton's brother, Will Horton, who had been merely 15 years old at the time of his sister's tragic drowning in the Calcasieu River. During Mary's meeting with Will, he fondly recalled his sister as a kind and virtuous individual, speaking of her in glowing terms. However, the sentiment wasn't reciprocated when it came to his brother-in-law, Felix Vale. Will shared that the Horton family held a distinct resentment towards Felix. Born on February 16, 1940, in Eunice, Louisiana, Mary Elizabeth Horton Vale's roots trace back to the southern state. In 1957, she was crowned a Eunice High School homecoming queen and took on the role of the editor for the school newspaper. Her path crossed with Felix's when she was pursuing her education at McNeese State College in 1960. Remarkably, a mere 6 months after their initial meeting in July 1961, the two exchanged vows in marriage. Their union bore fruit, as in 1961, Mary welcomed a son into the world named Bill Vale. However, Felix had a different opinion. With the arrival of their baby, Felix's demeanor underwent a notable change. Similar to his later behavior with Annette, he adopted a controlling attitude towards his first wife. He even used threats, warning her of severe outcomes if she were to become pregnant again. Despite the warning, Mary Elizabeth Horton Vale found herself pregnant again the following year. The news incited a fierce anger within Felix, prompting her to seek refuge from his rage. Fearing his wrath, she retreated to her mother's home, accompanied by her son, Bill. October 28, 1962, marked a tragic event when Mary Horton and Felix Vale were engaged in fishing along the Calcasieu River. In an unfortunate twist of fate, Mary met her demise by drowning. When questioned by the police, Felix recounted his version of events. "We took the boat from the Calcasieu River near Lake Charles," he stated. "While Mary was trawling, she shifted her position in the boat and accidentally fell overboard." However, the Horton family remained skeptical of this account, finding it hard to accept as the truth. Felix swiftly became the prime suspect in the case due to suspicious circumstances surrounding Mary's drowning. The location of her death was not suitable for fishing activities. Her body, discovered 2 days later, underwent an autopsy that revealed telltale signs. Bruising on her neck, right calf, and left leg indicated a possible struggle prior to her immersion in water. Further incriminating evidence emerged as authorities found a scarf wrapped around her neck and placed in her mouth, suggestive of traumatic asphyxia, a form of suffocation. Despite mounting evidence and all the detectives being sure that Felix was the murderer, the coroner had a totally different opinion. He believed that evidence was not enough to convict Felix. Moreover, Felix vehemently denied any guilt. In January 1963, a Calcasieu Parish grand jury failed to indict him, resulting in his release. As Will conveyed this information, breaking down in the process, Mary Rose was further inflamed by what she heard. Now, Mary Rose's pursuit extended beyond seeking justice solely for her daughter, Annette. It encompassed a resolute quest for justice on behalf of Will's sister, Mary Horton, as well. However, before justice could be obtained for the two women, and before the police could be fully engaged, Mary recognized the necessity for more tangible evidence beyond mere statements. Fortunately, she was no longer alone in her battle for justice. Upon understanding the complexities of Annette's story, Will gained a clear understanding of the situation and provided Mary with a particularly intriguing piece of information. Will disclosed to Mary that he had been receiving numerous calls since 1975, inquiring about a girl who had disappeared from Sulphur, Louisiana, in 1973. To compound the eeriness of the situation, the girl in question was none other than Sharon Hensley, who happened to be Felix's girlfriend after Mary Horton. Embarking on a new journey in her quest for information, Mary Rose now set her sights on a different destination. In 1994, she traveled to Bismarck, North Dakota to meet with Brian Hensley, Sharon's brother. Sharon Hensley, born on December 20, 1948, left her home in Bismarck, North Dakota, during the summer of 1970, with dreams of peace and love. She aimed to embrace a new life, joining other free-spirited individuals who were shaping their journey in the wake of the famous Summer of Love. San Francisco beckoned as the ultimate destination for Hensley. She succeeded in reaching her goal. However, the reality that awaited her was a far cry from the picturesque existence she had envisioned in her North Dakota haven. Instead, her path led her to Felix Vale. During that time, following the passing of his first wife, Felix delved into a hippie lifestyle, embracing a transient existence. He even took on the role of a wandering preacher, and during this phase he established his own personal cult, known as the Holy Order of Mans. It was within this period that 21-year-old Sharon met Felix. 2 years after her departure in 1972, Sharon returned to her parents' home in Bismarck, accompanied by her new boyfriend, Felix Vale. However, something had changed in their daughter. The once energetic girl from North Dakota who enjoyed dancing and spending time with friends now appeared to be distant. Her independence seemed to be eclipsed by her new boyfriend's influence, much to her parents' concern. The meeting left her parents uneasy, but Sharon, being an adult, chose to depart with Felix. She held the autonomy to make her own decisions. Nonetheless, her parents' worries intensified. They held the belief that Felix was leading their daughter into a troubling lifestyle, one marked by drug use and reckless behavior. However, even they couldn't have foreseen what lay ahead in the future. Sharon soon became a member of the Holy Order of Mans, engaging with the group for a brief duration. However, her involvement coincided with a stark shift in circumstances. Felix's behavior underwent a transformation, turning increasingly violent and domineering while his drug consumption escalated progressively. Sharon was on the brink of departing for South America alongside Felix. However, before embarking on this journey, she made a final call to her mother to bid her farewell. Yet, her mother couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that something was amiss. After that last contact, no calls or letters arrived from Sharon. She vanished without a trace in 1973. Felix communicated with Sharon's family through a letter, asserting that he had last seen her in Key West. According to his account, she had left him and set out on a journey with an Australian couple to sail around the world. Yet just as was the recurring theme in all these cases, the Hensley family had doubts regarding everything Felix said. Sharon's family filed a missing persons report in February 1973, but unfortunately the police did not take any action for an entire year. Even though there weren't immediate investigations or initial police support, an old newspaper report filled the gap. The old newspaper report piqued Brian Hensley's interest. The news article was from 1970, about an arrest report of Sharon and Felix. The report stated that a young boy around the age of 8 appeared at the police station, seeking assistance to be taken back to his home. The child turned out to be none other than Bill Vale, the son of Mary Horton and Felix Vale. The police discovered that without the knowledge of the Horton family, Felix had taken Bill with him when he left for California after Mary Horton's death. From that point on, Bill was compelled to accompany his troubled father wherever he went. The police also learned that Bill had suffered from violence during this time, until he managed to run away and find his way to the police station. Felix and Sharon were arrested for child endangerment. However, how the two got free is not known. Upon learning from Sharon's brother, Mary Rose resolved to meet with Bill Vale. She believed that Bill had valuable information about Felix's location, making him a potential source of crucial details. Driven by this intention, Mary embarked on a journey to Kansas to meet with Bill and his family. At first, Bill was hesitant to divulge extensive information, as he feared the sharing details might inadvertently bring Felix closer to his own wife and children. Nevertheless, his desire to assist Mary and secure justice for his mother prevailed. Bill recognized the significance of this opportunity and chose not to let it slip away. Building up some courage, he revealed the hidden secrets that could prove Mary right. Bill recounted a pivotal moment from 1970, just before he fled and reached the police station. He had inadvertently overheard a conversation between his father, Felix, and Sharon. Following the arrest of Sharon and Felix in 1970, Bill found refuge with his grandparents, which marked a significant transformation in his life. Despite this change, his fear of his father persisted, especially as he was compelled to testify against him in court during the trials. This anxiety heightened as he dreaded the possibility of his father's return. And tragically, Felix did reappear. In 1975, Felix came to Bill's residence asserting that he solely wanted to see his son. Bill was gripped by fear, but what made his fear stronger was the absence of Sharon, who was no longer with Felix. Bill grappled with the fear that Felix might inflict harm upon his family if he divulged these revelations. Yet his determination for justice was more powerful. Tragically, Bill's life was cut short by cancer in 2009, preventing him from witnessing the realization of justice for his mother. However, before his passing, Bill took meticulous steps to ensure his account of Felix's confession was documented. He engaged his local preacher to record his narrative, safeguarding the truth for posterity. After years of relentless investigation, Mary finally sensed that she possessed something substantial enough to urge the FBI to reopen the case. Even though she was aware of the absence of concrete physical evidence, she held on to the conviction that the collective testimony of the Hortons, Sharon's brother, Felix's son Bill, and herself could potentially provide the ammunition needed to fight for justice on behalf of her daughter. Tragically, the agent who'd shown belief in Mary's cause was let go due to budget constraints, and the cold case department bore the brunt of the cutbacks. This unfortunate turn of events left no avenue for Mary's request to be pursued. She found herself right back where she started. However, the families who had faith in her knew she would not stop. Meanwhile, Mary's resolve to fight for justice had taken a toll on her over the span of nearly 30 long years, gradually wearing her down. In June 2011, while listening to the radio, Mary learned about an investigator who had successfully resolved 8 murder cases related to the notorious burning Mississippi murders orchestrated by the Ku Klux Klan. These cases had remained unsolved for a half a century until he managed to crack them. Hearing about this gave Mary another push that she needed. Without delay, Mary embarked on a mission to obtain his contact information. Fortunately, she succeeded in locating his number. This individual, a resident of Mississippi, was Jerry Mitchell, and Jerry's answer was simple. After briefing Jerry on the case, Mary discovered that Felix had relocated to Mississippi. Faced with this revelation, Mary confronted a straightforward decision that she needed to make. In 2011, the two of them journeyed to Mississippi and arrived at the pivotal location, a secluded and desolate trailer park. However, 64-year-old Mary was least bothered. All she wanted was to end the chapter of Felix Vale. As Mary emerged from the house, she and Jerry noticed an individual rushing in their direction. Yet it wasn't Felix Vale. Instead, it was his sister, Kay Faulkner. At first, Kay was incensed by their unexpected presence, but her anger quickly subsided upon learning the purpose of Mary and Jerry Mitchell's visit. Recognizing the rapid progress achieved merely a day into the investigation, Jerry Mitchell capitalized on the momentum without delay. He proceeded to interview the Hortons, Hensleys, and Mary Rose, resulting in the publication of a book titled Gone in 2015, a mere 4 years later. This book carefully recorded the stories and experiences of the families. It quickly gained significant praise and received multiple awards. This development caught the attention of the FBI, who, comprehending the intricate details, made the decision to reopen the case. After a prolonged period of struggle, Mary finally experienced a sense of genuine happiness. The FBI meticulously reviewed all available information and opted to prioritize Mary Horton's case primarily because her death was confirmed, unlike Sharon and Annette, whose bodies were never found. However, the challenge lay in the fact that this case dated back around more than 50 years, causing reports and data to be lost over time. Nevertheless, the FBI persisted in their efforts, even as they sought a district attorney willing to tackle this complex and antiquated case. And they finally found the right person for the job. It was Hugh Holland. Hugh Holland wasted no time and swiftly deployed a squad to raid Felix's residence as the initial step. In the journals, Felix described how he even liked to drink raw blood. However, nothing related to the murders was there. Now Holland decided to find someone who would know anything about the Calcasieu incident in 1962, where Mary Horton had drowned. And surprisingly, they found a man. He was 90-year-old Isaac Absher. During their meeting, as Holland conversed with Absher, who was confined to a wheelchair, Absher handed him an envelope. The contents of the envelope turned out to be photographs depicting Mary Horton's body on the day of its discovery, revealing extensive bruising and injuries. Holland took a hold of the photographs and commenced his examination when he finally got the conclusion. Armed with substantial evidence and the necessary proof, Holland swiftly pressed charges against 76-year-old Felix Vale for the murder of his first wife, Mary Horton. In a fitting twist of fate, the very place where the saga had begun, Louisiana, also became the site where it finally reached its conclusion. In 2014, this marked the moment of reckoning as Felix was apprehended and arrested. Throughout the trial, Sharon and Annette's disappearances were also highlighted. Vale was, after all, the last person to see them both. Recognizing the pivotal role of Absher's testimony in the case, Holland requested Absher to provide his testimony, acknowledging its significance as the most crucial piece of evidence in the entire proceedings. Merely 3 months after delivering his testimony, Isaac Absher passed away on May 17, 2014, due to old age at his residence. Nonetheless, his testimony proved to be a decisive factor that dispelled all doubts during the court proceedings. It just took the jury approximately 10 minutes to get the final decision. Felix Vale was found guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment. While Felix's involvement in Annette's and Sharon's disappearance was not definitively established, Mary and Brian found a sense of peace in the fact that he was held accountable for his actions and finally received the justice he deserved. With Felix incarcerated and justice achieved, Mary's relentless pursuit was vindicated. Nevertheless, the emotional wound in her heart remained unhealed, a reminder of the enduring pain she had endured. Seeking solace from her lingering guilt of having left her daughter due to work, Mary found a coping mechanism in writing letters as though they were intended for Annette to read, with a hope that one day she would finally be able to forgive herself. The case of Smith family. George Smith was born and raised in Greenwich, Connecticut. He came from a close-knit, caring family, an environment that nurtured his intelligence. His father, George Smith Sr., owned a liquor store in the town, which was not just a job, but a passion that brought him joy. George Smith pursued higher education in business at Babson College in Massachusetts and graduated in February. After completing his studies, he worked in Boston as a data mining analyst for several years. However, he realized that his true passion was helping his family in the business. In February 2005, George made the conscious decision to return home to learn the basics of business from his family's store. His goal was to one day take over the business, allowing his parents to retire and enjoy the fruits of their labor. In February 2002, at a reunion with old friends, George Smith met Jennifer. She, a Connecticut native who had just found work as an elementary school teacher, would later become his life partner. George was immediately attracted to her beautiful appearance, open personality, and strong ambition, and they quickly fell deeply in love. George's parents also welcomed Jennifer with open arms. 3 years later, in February 2005, when George was 26, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. Their picturesque wedding ceremony was held right on the beach at the Castle Hill in Newport, Rhode Island. Nai sa bui lu. Cap doi moi koi de ten hong tuan trang mat ixi hoa kio de 12 gay trend du Thuyan Royal Caribbean. Their journey began in Barcelona on June 29th, with stops in France's Côte d'Azur and along Italy's coast. On board, George and Jennifer befriended another couple and a young man named Josh Askin from California. Josh Askin, a 20 years old with a great sense of humor, quickly became friends with George. The group had a great time together. On July 1st, when the ship docked off the Italian coast, they decided to spend the day on land. July 4th, they explored the island, wandering through the narrow streets of the old town, swimming in the crystal-clear Aegean Sea, and sampling local cuisine in quaint taverns. They were carefree and happy, enjoying each other's company and the island's beauty. The group left Mykonos with unforgettable memories and planned to continue the fun on the ship's deck that evening. After a romantic dinner, George and Jennifer rejoined their friends on the ship. The group decided to get together and enjoy a good time together, laugh and create memories of their vacation. The evening was filled with laughter and excitement. After enjoying appetizers and drinks, the newlyweds, accompanied by Josh Askin, headed to the ship Siaskino to continue the fun. George and Josh Askin spent their evening enjoying a game of craps, while Jennifer had fun playing poker at a nearby table. As the night came to a close, the newlyweds had lost a substantial amount of money, but they joked about it lightheartedly, unbothered by their losses. After the Siaskino closed, they decided to keep the party going. Later, around 2:30 a.m. on June 5, 2005, security cameras on the Greek island of Mykonos caught footage of George leaving the Siaskino, but it remains unclear whether he returned to his cabin afterwards. George Smith, a 26-year-old newlywed, is on his honeymoon with his wife Jennifer. They is having a fantastic time together, soaking up the lively atmosphere and entertainment on board. However, their enjoyable evening suddenly takes a mysterious turn. Upon investigating the incident, the ship's captain searched George's cabin, finding unusual footprints under the window, as well as evidence of a disturbance on deck. George was missing, and footprints at the scene suggested there may have been a struggle, raising doubts about George's safety. The sudden disappearance of the newlywed couple spread quickly, causing passengers on the ship to become worried and scared. The crew cordoned off Deck 7 and restricted access to cabins while they searched for George and Jennifer. After finding blood, it was presumed that they had vanished under mysterious circumstances. The senior officer took charge of the investigation and went to their stateroom to gather more information. Based on the evidence, it was suspected that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for they continued on the other side of the ship. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found in the ship's spa, where she was receiving a pre-booked massage. She looked surprised and worried, claiming she had no idea where her husband was and hadn't seen him since the previous night. According to Jennifer, she woke up and found George not there, but she thought he was with friends or in another cabin. She then went to her spa appointment without giving his absence a second thought. At noon, Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate the disappearance of George. The captain reassured passengers that the investigation was necessary to understand what happened and hoped it would end quickly. The police began by questioning George's wife, Jennifer, who was visibly agitated and seemed to have limited information about her husband's disappearance. Jennifer told the police that she had last seen George the previous night and that Royal Caribbean staff had informed her that he may have fallen overboard. The discovery of blood on the boat's awning suggests that something terrible has happened to George. As a result, Jennifer became the main suspect due to her agitated state and apparent lack of knowledge about her husband's disappearance. The investigators then examined cabin 962, which was found to be in disarray, suggesting a possible struggle. In the bathroom, they discovered small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Furthermore, 2 small blood stains, each approximately 2 centimeters long, were found on the bedding. The blood samples were later identified as belonging to George. George's disappearance from the cabin remains a mystery, and all evidence points to the fact that he experienced trauma before he disappeared. A chair on the balcony, positioned to allow someone to sit next to the railing, caught the investigators' attention. Marks on the railing suggested someone had indeed sat there, sparking suspicion that George might have fallen. However, the high railing and bloodstains on the boat's awning and inside the cabin hinted at a more sinister scenario: murder. Investigators have been trying to determine who George was with that night, and what may have led to his disappearance. The inquiry was in its early stages, but it was already clear that the case was complex and fraught with mysteries. The Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate George Smith's disappearance. They began by questioning the group of friends with whom the newlyweds had spent the previous night. As the investigation remained shrouded in mystery, every detail was crucial. They reported that George and Jennifer had consumed excessive alcohol, leading to George's intoxication. They claimed to have helped him back to the cabin, put him to bed, and removed his shoes before leaving him alone. However, they were unable to account for Jennifer's whereabouts and assumed she had returned to the cabin later. Notably, Josh Askin's testimony contained inconsistencies. He alleged that Jennifer had left the group to go with a casino employee named Lloyd, contradicting the assumption that she had returned to the cabin. Josh Askin and Jennifer have deep feelings for each other, and they have both openly expressed their feelings for George. However, when reviewing the security footage, the story is different. At 3:30 a.m., the footage showed Jennifer leaving with new friends, while George stayed behind. Furthermore, data from Lloyd's key card indicated that he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., a fact confirmed by his girlfriend. This new information raised more questions and led investigators to suspect that Josh Askin may have been hiding some crucial details. As the investigation continues, each new revelation added more mystery to the story. On a different part of the ship, a young man named Greg Rosenberg was enjoying a family cruise with friends, including his cousin Zach Rosenberg and close friend Rostislav Kaufman. The 3 men, who all held American passports despite their Russian heritage, lived in New York City. Greg Rosenberg and Jennifer had started their evening at the casino, trying their luck at poker together. After the casino closed at 2:30 a.m., they joined their friends and decided to continue the party. The group headed to the ship's disco, where they danced and drank together, enjoying each other's company. Lloyd Bota, the casino manager, was also seen having a good time with the young men. The witnesses' accounts of the nighttime activities start to conflict with one another as the group members disperse to their cabins. It was already late, and they were visibly intoxicated. According to the ship's rules, passengers who were loud and behaved inappropriately would have their drink delivery blocked. When the staff refused to serve their drunk visitors, they remembered they had a bottle of absinthe they had bought on the island of Mykonos. However, the crew had forbidden passengers from consuming their own alcohol on board. Josh Askin returned to his cabin to retrieve a special bottle of wormwood wine that he said he had purchased earlier. It was later discovered that this absinthe was exceptionally strong, with an alcohol concentration of over 70%, making it one of the strongest drinks available. George decided to help his friend by hiding the bottle of absinthe in his shorts. However, an observant janitor noticed something unusual. A group of young men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, Josh Askin, and George, were drinking from the bottle. This incident was added to the investigation. That evening, not only the men were intoxicated. Jennifer, at first very alert and calm, then showed signs of intoxication. She began to stagger and at one point, leaned on Lloyd, the casino managed. Some thought she was trying to regain her balance, while others interpreted it as flirting. What happened next between Jennifer and George remains unclear. According to eyewitness accounts, they got into an argument, but it's unknown if they were joking or serious. At some point, Jennifer hit George, and it's unclear if it was playful or out of anger. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., visibly intoxicated and stumbling. George stayed behind with his new friends. The staff's testimony was crucial in uncovering what happened next. Jennifer's unsteady walk caught the attention of the janitor, who had seen her and her friends drinking earlier. He helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right when she reached her deck. However, this is where the story takes a confusing turn. Her stateroom was on the left, but she headed in the opposite direction. Jennifer was found asleep in a hallway far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock read 4:52 a.m., but her husband George was not there. The curtains on the balcony doors were closed tightly and remained still despite the breeze, raising questions about whether George had gone out to the balcony on his own after his friends left him in bed. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife were in a neighboring cabin. They were awakened at 4 a.m. by a noise and heard loud sounds coming from George's stateroom, number 9062. Chit Hyman reported the noise to guest services and also yelled through the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. The noise stopped briefly, but then loud talking resumed for about 3 minutes. An argument on the balcony followed, during which someone said goodnight repeatedly, as if trying to make people leave. After that, there were sounds of furniture being moved, and finally a loud thud, like something had fallen. Chit Hyman decided to investigate a disturbance and opened the door to find 3 unidentified men. Other passengers also reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the boat's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the eyewitnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. According to witnesses, 4 young men entered the cabin, but only 3 of them were visible when they exited. This raised the question of whether one of them might have stayed inside to search for money from the newlywed couple, who had recently won a significant amount at the casino. The theory of a failed robbery attempt seems plausible, but there are inconsistencies in the alibis of the 3 boys, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav. They claimed to have been in another stateroom just minutes after Hyman saw the 3 unknown men. The key card records for George's stateroom confirmed that they entered it at 4:05 a.m., but there is no record of them entering the cabin again. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. Another theory suggests that George and Jennifer's drunkenness was not simply due to excessive alcohol consumption. Although they appeared relatively sober when they left the casino at 2:30 a.m., they were unable to return to their cabin on their own by 3:30 a.m., implying possible exposure to illicit substances. This idea is supported by the testimony of other casino visitors, who reported that George and Jennifer openly discussed having large sums of money, possibly from wedding gifts or casino winnings. Estimates of their wealth varied, but all witnesses agreed it was in the tens of thousands of dollars. The fact that George wore an expensive Breitling watch and Jennifer owned a valuable engagement ring further suggested they were wealthy. It's possible that their quarters were targeted by thieves searching for the money they had been boasting about. 2 possible explanations have been proposed for the disappearance of George. The first theory suggests that the kidnapper may have injured George while trying to remove his valuable watch, resulting in bloodstains on the sheet. The second theory focuses on the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. After discovering that the passengers had been drinking and finding footprints on the balcony, the captain suspected that an accidental fall overboard might have occurred during a scuffle. Particular attention has been paid to hallucinations caused by drinking wormwood wine, a beverage containing the active ingredient thujone. However, toxicology experts note that the concentration of thujone plays a crucial role in determining its effects. Importantly, absinthe sold in European countries today is strictly regulated, and the thujone concentration is limited to such a low level that it is incapable of causing hallucinations. The fact that the George actually purchased the wormwood wine in Europe makes it unlikely that it caused the hallucinations, as experts claim that the amount of alcohol required to produce such hallucinations would have to be extremely large. In reality, only black market absinthe with a much higher concentration could potentially cause hallucinations. In the investigation into George Smith's disappearance, the FBI conducted polygraph interviews with Jennifer and Lloyd Botta, and who both passed. However, Josh Askin failed the polygraph, which may suggest that he is hiding something about George's disappearance. The investigation into George's mysterious death uncovered a significant piece of evidence, a videotape featuring 3 individuals, including Russians, making jokes about an incident. The FBI agents reviewed this tape, and a particular comment made by one of the men, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," suggests a potential connection to George's case. During the investigation in February 2009, FBI agents interviewed Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh Askin as witnesses. However, Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin declined to provide a direct answer. Their answers remained vague, implying that they did not want to share full details of what happened. Another crucial witness was Greg Rosenberg, who was with the group of men entertaining on the night of the incident. He claimed they ordered food to their cabin that evening, providing a possible alibi for the Russian men. Nevertheless, inconsistencies were found in this statement. However, this information is incorrect. According to the ship's service records, their cabin was blocked from service that day. Staff were also specifically instructed not to serve the group that evening. Greg could not confidently say which passenger in the cabin had ordered food. Witnesses offered differing opinions on the nature of George and Jennifer's relationship, citing various observations and recollections. Greg believed it was challenging to gauge the quality of their relationship due to the group's heavy drinking. According to him, everyone in the group was extremely intoxicated, making it hard to determine the specifics of their interactions. There was a discrepancy in testimony as to whether Greg left the cabin immediately after ordering food. Josh Skin provided information that Greg left the cabin after ordering food. However, Greg denied this statement, saying that he never left. This contradiction complicated the investigation, requiring further investigation to establish the facts. In December 2019, Greg Rosenberg was murdered, and the case remains unsolved. Investigators are exploring a potential connection between his death and that of George Smith. The mysterious circumstances surrounding George Smith's appearance have raised significant questions about his background and family. As details emerged, the situation grew increasingly complicated, with the actions of his relatives following the tragedy drawing scrutiny from both the public and law enforcement. The George family persisted in seeking answers and justice regarding George's disappearance. The case was moved from the FBI's Connecticut office to the New York office. The family offered a $100,000 reward for any information that could help identify and bring to justice those responsible for the crime. They also called for a boycott of the shipping company, which they believed was trying to cover up the incident to protect its profits. The incident also strained the relationship between George's parents and his young wife, Jennifer. Her behavior was closely scrutinized, and many found her composure suspicious. She said she was acting on the orders of FBI agents, doing exactly as they told her. However, her hesitation to provide more information sparked suspicion. The George family, who were seeking truth and justice, became disheartened when Jennifer agreed to a $1 million settlement offer from the judgment company. This move appeared to them as a betrayal. They felt the Turkish authorities' investigation lacked transparency, and Jennifer seemed too hasty in accepting the offer, fueling their suspicions that she was concealing information and wasn't invested in uncovering the truth. In contrast, Jennifer says she has very few memories of what happened after 2:30 a.m. that night, unaware that the liner's staff had even found her in the corridor and escorted her back to her cabin. This satisfied with the Turkish investigation, the George family to take matters into their own hands by engaging independent forensic scientist Henry Lee to assist them. Henry Lee conducted a series of studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. These studies could have revealed crucial information about the events surrounding George's death and potentially confirmed one of their main theories: murder or accident. According to Henry Lee, the height of the balcony makes it unclear whether George's fall was an accident or not. It is possible that a third party pushed him or that he was in a state of insanity and climbed onto a chair before falling. Henry Lee had planned to conduct an experiment to simulate a fall from the balcony, but the cruise line owner refused to allow it. George's relatives believe that this decision was made to obstruct their efforts to uncover the truth. Henry Lee also conducted investigations in the cabin, on the balcony, and on the boat, but the results of these investigations were not made public. Meanwhile, the FBI launched its own investigation, but many of its findings and discoveries were kept secret. The FBI's investigation into George Smith's disappearance focused on 4 young men who spent the night with him, as well as 3 Russians: Greg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the mystery and confusion surrounding the case. Initially, Jennifer was a suspect, but she was eventually cleared of suspicion. The family then increased the amount of their lawsuit against the company and used the payout to secure the release of the investigation's results, including witness statements and other relevant information. Jennifer was left to cherish the memories of George and dedicated herself to charitable work in his honor. She later remarried, continuing to strive to make a positive impact in his memory. The FBI launched an extensive investigation into George Smith's disappearance, but it was ultimately unable to uncover the truth about his fate or recover his body. Due to lack of evidence, the case was eventually closed, and his death was officially classified as an accident. George's family continues to seek answers about the circumstances surrounding his death, and not being able to visit his grave and pay their respects is the greatest suffering for them. They remain hopeful that the truth will eventually come to light, bringing closure to the case. The case of Banaz Mahmoud. Banaz Mahmoud was born in Iraq in 1985. She grew up in a traditional family with strong religious beliefs. When she was 10, her family moved to the UK, but their cultural values remained unchanged. At 17, Banas was forced into a marriage with a man 10 years her senior who spoke no English and was illiterate. The marriage was marked by physical and emotional abuse, which Banaz endured for 2 years before finally finding the courage to leave. Despite her family's disapproval, Banaz started a new life and met a man named Rahmat Suleimani, with whom she fell deeply in love. However, their relationship was kept secret due to the cultural taboos surrounding romance outside of marriage. Tragically, Banaz's family was not willing to let her move on from her past. On January 26, 2006, Rahmat reported Banas missing to the police, but they didn't take the report seriously, convinced that she was just staying with friends. However, Rahmat persisted, and eventually the police were forced to investigate. Banaz's family had a sinister motive for their behavior, which would ultimately lead to devastating consequences. However, Banaz had found love and happiness with her boyfriend, Rahmat. They had dreams of getting married, having children, and building a happy family life. These fantasies what Banaz's joy and kept her going despite her family's hatred and aggression towards her. Her family had never accepted her husband, and in early October 2005, Banaz noticed that she was being followed by people sent by her father. On October 10, 2005, Banaz went to the police and told them about her life with her husband, the injuries she had suffered, and the surveillance she was under. She shared her fears for her safety and even her life, but the police did not take her statement seriously. For about 2 months, Banaz and Rama met secretly, but in early December 2005, they were spotted by people from her clan. This led to a council of male relatives gathering at her family home, where it was decided that Banaz should be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this conversation and reported it to the police, but they again did not take her words seriously. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father tricked her into going to a relative's house, where she was attacked. She managed to escape and went to the police, who took her to the hospital. After being discharged, Banaz went to live with Rahmat. However, by mid-January 2006, Banaz's family began urging her to return home to mend their relationship and discuss her marriage to Rahmat. Despite her fears, Banaz agreed to go back to her father's house, believing that her mother would protect her. Before Banaz Mahmood returned to her family's home, she visited the police station to report her concerns and name individuals who might harm her. However, she disappeared on January 22, 2006, and her friend Rahmat was unable to contact her. Rahmat then filed a missing persons report with the police. The police eventually became involved in the case, and Chief Inspector Caroline Good was appointed to lead the investigation. She organized a large-scale search of properties associated with the Mahmood family, suspecting that Banaz might be being held captive. The police questioned Banaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband, as well as 3 of her cousins, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Mohammed Hamid, who were also suspects. Despite the efforts of the police, Banaz's family was uncooperative and refused to help with the investigation. The police found no pictures of Banaz at her family's home, and her family members gave contradictory and false statements about her whereabouts. The police arrested 30 people, including Banaz's family members and cousins, but they all tried to slow down the investigation by giving false information. The police obtained permission to install listening devices in the cells of the arrested men, including Banaz's father, uncle, and Muhammad Hamid. The wiretap recordings revealed that the 3 men had no remorse for their actions and were actually proud of what they had done to Banaz. The recordings revealed that on the morning of January 23rd, the Mahmood family deliberately left their home, allowing Ali Hussein and Hamid to enter and attack Banaz. The attack lasted for 2 hours, during which Banaz was subjected to beatings and violence. Finally, Hamid strangled her to death with a cord. The wiretap recordings also revealed that Banaz's cousin, Muhammad Hamid, had been involved in the attack and had threatened Rahmat, which became a turning point in the investigation. The police were horrified as they listened to recordings that detailed the brutal murder of Banaz and the perpetrators' proud descriptions of their actions. The investigation revealed that Banaz's body had been stuffed into a suitcase and taken out of London to a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good, a detective, matched the information she received with the movement data of the arrested phones and determined the search area. Despite the vastness of the area, the work could take a long time, but the criminals themselves helped the investigation by being talkative and reveling in their actions. During the conversation, one of them mentioned putting a freezer back in its place, which gave Caroline a key lead to follow. A police helicopter was dispatched to search the area, and while circling, it spotted a house with a pile of trash in the backyard. including a white oblong object that looked like a freezer. When the police inspected the area, they started digging in shifts. As they dug, they eventually reached a depth of about shoulder height. At this point, they were about to give up. But then Caroline Good recalled the words of Muhammad Hamama, who had bragged about burying Banars so deeply that she would only be discovered if someone tipped them off. Caroline convinced the team to extend the search for one more day, and late in the evening of April 28, 2006, the suitcase was found. Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, and only dental records and DNA samples could be used to identify her. Her body was folded into a fetal position and hidden in a suitcase, buried under a freezer in the garden of a house in Birmingham. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were charged, but they showed no remorse and were convinced they had done the right thing. After the discovery of Banaz's remains, the police received a flood of people providing alibis for the suspects, claiming they were in public on the day of the alleged murder. In total, 50 people were involved in Banaz's death, and Caroline Good felt anger, disgust, and contempt for the men who participated in the murder. The case eventually went to trial in March 2007, and the prosecutor described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution ordered by Banaz's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury found all three guilty and sentenced them to life imprisonment with minimum terms ranging from 17 to 23 years. The judge condemned the crime as barbaric and heartless, saying that the father had put his status in society above the life of his own flesh and blood. Muhammad Ali was arrested in Iraq in April 2006 for a crime against a young woman named Banaz Mahmood. The London police worked to extradite him to the UK. In June 2009, Ali was extradited and eventually sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. The last of the 5 perpetrators, Omar Hussein, was hiding in the Iraqi countryside. In December 2009, he got into an argument with his brother and was shot in the leg. He was taken to the hospital where the police arrested him. Initially, Hussein denied being in London in February 2005, and therefore couldn't be involved in Banaz's death. However, UK social security records prove that he was receiving refugee benefits at the time, contradicting his claim. In March 2010, Hussein was extradited and later sentenced to life imprisonment. Donna Aman, who was in the house at the time of Banaz's murder, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for helping to dispose of the victim's body and obstructing justice. A recorded interview at the police station revealed her family's guilt. Banaz had tried to leave her abusive husband several times, but returned to try again at the insistence of her family. The police's indifference to her plight led to her death, which sparked significant changes in how honor killings are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched, and 9 police officers were prosecuted for their inadequate response. 7 received reprimands and 2 were dismissed. Caroline Good, a determined detective, not only found Banaz's body, but also secured the conviction of her father and uncle, and brought back the escaped criminals from Iraq. Unfortunately, this wouldn't bring Banaz back to life or change the fact that her own relatives who should have protected her were responsible for her death. Banaz was buried in the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service was held on June 26, 2007 at the MN Auditorium, followed by a granite memorial headstone at her grave. Her family did not attend either service. The memorial was paid for by law enforcement officials working on the Banaz case and the women's rights organization. Ramat Soleimani, Banaz's boyfriend, remained in the UK under the Witness Protection Program, but never recovered from her death. In May 2016, 10 years after the crime, he hanged himself, marking his 3rd attempt to end his life. The extent of the problem with police handling of honor crimes is unknown due to the lack of recording requirements. However, estimates suggest that in February, there were 5,000 honor killings worldwide. And in 2010, over 20,800 cases of honor-based violence were reported in Iran and Kurdistan. These crimes typically involve women who are perceived to have brought shame to their families or communities. Most cases occur in South Asia or the Middle East, predominantly in Muslim communities. However, cases like that of 19-year-old Banaz Mahmood, a Kurdish woman living in Britain, highlight the tensions faced by immigrant communities as they struggle to adapt to changing lifestyles. Some groups estimate that thousands of honor crimes go unreported in minority communities in Britain, where women are often taken abroad and forced into marriage or harmed when their modern outlook on life conflicts with their traditional male communities. Banaz Mahmood, who was murdered in February 2006, is a tragic example of this. Her older sister Beal urges other women in similar situations not to be afraid to seek help before it's too late. Even today, Beal lives in fear for her life, hiding her identity behind a long black veil that covers her entire body and face, except for her eyes. The story of Banis Mahmood is a stark reminder that women who try to escape or live a secret life are constantly in fear of being found and punished. The Metropolitan Police team that investigated Banaz's murder and brought those responsible to justice was awarded for their work in detective investigation. A crucial piece of evidence was a videotape that captured Banaz's nervous testimony, in which she described the violence and oppression she faced at the hands of her abusive husband and the intimidation she suffered from men on the street. She warned of her impending death due to the shame she had brought upon her family. Unfortunately, her warnings were ignored, and she was ultimately killed. The case of Jennifer Londano. Jennifer Londano, a 31-year-old engaged and responsible individual, failed to arrive at her job in Englewood, New Jersey, prompting concerns from her family and friends. As the manager of the newly opened Luna Lounge on Armory Street, Jennifer was a diligent worker with a spotless attendance record. However, on June 25, 2017, she vanished without a trace after closing the bar in the early morning hours. When she didn't show up for her shift that evening, her coworkers grew worried and attempted to contact her, but her phone was switched off, which was unusual because she always maintained regular communication with them. This lack of response heightening their anxiety, her loved ones decided to file a missing person report with the police, highlighting that she always checked in with them before going anywhere. As the investigation began, police visited Jennifer's apartment, where she lived alone. The officers found the front door locked with no signs of forced entry or damage. Upon entering the apartment, they initially noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The space was clean and well maintained, with no signs of disarray or theft. At first glance, nothing suggested that the apartment was a crime scene. After investigating Jennifer's apartment and finding no leads, the police visited the bar where she worked as a manager to gather more information. They spoke with the staff at the establishment and discovered that Jennifer was well liked by everyone, with no reported conflicts with patrons or employees. Her co-workers described her as kind, helpful, and highly respected. Jennifer was a driven and ambitious person who had a strong work ethic. In February 2016, she partnered with 40-year-old Rafael Lolos to open the Luna Lounge in Englewood, New Jersey. The bar was successful, thanks in part to Jennifer's exceptional people skills and management abilities. Lolos provided the financial backing, while Jennifer was the face of the business, charming customers with her warm personality. What the police discovered during their conversation with the bar staff was that Jennifer and Rafael's relationship went beyond business. They were romantically involved, and their relationship was public knowledge. Despite their close relationship, they had not yet taken the step of living together. The investigation revealed that on the morning Jennifer was last seen, she had closed the bar and gotten into Rafael's car, which was waiting for her after work. As the last person to see her, Rafael became a key person of interest, and the detectives decided to bring him in for questioning. Rafael claimed that he drove Jennifer home from work after she closed the bar, and they spent some time together at her apartment before he left to let her rest for her shift that evening. Following her disappearance, Rafael maintained contact with Jennifer's family and collaborated with them to try to determine her whereabouts. Since there was no apparent connection between Rafael and Jennifer's disappearance, the police concentrated on investigating other leads. However, they faced challenges due to Jennifer's phone being turned off on the day she disappeared, with the last signal coming from a cell tower near her home. Neighborhood interviews yielded no suspicious information. As part of the investigation, the police requested banking records, as they often provide crucial clues in such cases. When the bank shared the data, it revealed an unexpected development. Jennifer's bank card had been used even after she went missing. The investigation led detectives to suspect that Jennifer was intentionally hiding, but her family strongly disagreed, convinced that she would never willingly cause them distress. To gather more information, the police began to investigate the activity on her card, seeking to determine when, where, and how it was used. 2 days after Jennifer's disappearance, on June 27th, a pedestrian walking along Pier 44 in Brooklyn noticed something unusual in the water. The person stared at the object for a while, unable to identify it, before realizing with shock that it was a human body, or at least part of one. The police were summoned to the scene, and the pier was sealed off. A thorough search by divers yielded no additional body parts or evidence. The police faced a daunting challenge in identifying the victim, but a potential lead emerged. A tattoo was discovered on the victim's right thigh during a forensic examination. The tattoo, which may have belonged to the victim, was partially translated from Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language with complex grammar. The police released an image of the tattoo, hoping someone would recognize it and provide information. Investigations revealed that the tattoo's inscription was Sanskrit, but incorrectly written. The tattoo artist and the victim seemed to intend to write Liliana, but did so with grammatical errors, suggesting neither of them was familiar with the language. For days after the initial gruesome discovery, police received another disturbing call from a passerby who spotted a leg on the riverbank near 79th Street. Police immediately cordoned off the area and pulled the leg out of the water. The leg, which was intact from the knee down, seemed to match the remains found earlier, leading investigators to believe they belonged to the same person. A notable detail was the pink painted fingernails on the leg. Despite an extensive search by divers in the area, no other remains or evidence were found. However, forensic analysis soon confirmed that the fragments found were indeed from the same body. Around this time, the police had already identified the victim. A few days after releasing an image of the distinctive tattoo, a woman contacted the police station and revealed that she knew the tattoo's owner. It was Jennifer's mother, Gladys Quintero, who recognized the tattoo on the news and recognized it as belonging to her daughter. The tattoo, it turned out, was a tribute to Jennifer's late aunt and symbolized the name Lily or Liliana, Jennifer's mother, to New York to identify human remains. When it was confirmed that the remains were Jennifer's, the family was left shattered. The discovery marked a significant turn in the case, transforming a missing person investigation into a homicide probe. The family was not only grief-stricken by Jennifer's death, but also horrified by the brutal circumstances surrounding it. Unfortunately, due to the state of the remains, it was impossible to determine the exact cause of death. Despite an extensive search, the police were unable to recover additional body parts. As family and friends paid their respects to Jennifer at her workplace, the bar, detectives were making progress in their investigation. They tracked down leads on Jennifer's credit card usage. Through a thorough review of security footage and store visits, detectives identified the person who had used Jennifer's credit card, Raphael, Jennifer's boyfriend. They discovered that Raphael had left Jennifer's apartment on the day she disappeared to go shopping. His purchases, made with Jennifer's credit card, included a box of garbage bags and 2 meat cleavers from different stores. Later that evening, he crossed the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan, and his cell phone records placed him near the Hudson River. Raphael went home after leaving Jennifer's apartment and never returned. 2 days later, Jennifer's torso was discovered. The police suspected that Raphael might have killed her and dismembered her body using meat cleavers, a disturbing thought considering their romantic relationship. However, the evidence pointing to Raphael's guilt was mounting. As a result, the police obtained an arrest warrant and a search warrant for his home, anticipating that they would soon apprehend him. Raphael attempted to evade capture by renting a hotel room and paying in cash, but he was quickly tracked down and arrested. He did not resist arrest and denied any involvement in Jennifer's death, claiming that Jennifer had given him her credit card. Raphael continued to insist that Jennifer was fine when he left her, but detectives uncovered more evidence that contradicted his testimony. A search of his home revealed dark red stains in the bathroom, which were later confirmed by a lab test to be Jennifer's dried blood. Detectives investigating Jennifer's disappearance analyzed her communications with Raphael and found a pattern of frequent arguments, typically sparked by jealousy. A search of Raphael's home uncovered a box sent via post office and a bag that had previously contained a GPS tracking device. It became clear that Raphael had secretly installed the device on Jennifer's car, allowing him to monitor her movements. Cell phone data revealed that Raphael had picked Jennifer up from work and taken her to her apartment. Although Jennifer's phone was soon turned off, Raphael's phone remained active. Between 9 p.m. and midnight on the day of her disappearance, his phone sent a signal to a cell tower near the Hudson River. This suggests that Jennifer may have already been dead by then, and Raphael may have driven to the river to dispose of her body. Raphael and Jennifer's relationship was complex and tumultuous, with conflicts often centered on financial issues. Despite their efforts to establish a business together, opening a bar less than a year before her disappearance, their relationship was marked by animosity and blurred boundaries. Raphael's messages to Jennifer were volatile, veering between insults, threats, apologies, and declarations of love, with one notable instance where he referred to her as a gold digger. Jennifer's family was shocked and disbelieving when the man who had claimed to love her and helped search for her became the prime suspect in her murder. Raphael refused to explain himself, denied any wrongdoing, and hired a lawyer. Although police couldn't find the exact knives they knew Raphael had bought, They were able to purchase identical ones from the same store. Forensic analysis later confirmed that these knives were used to harm Jennifer's body. Raphael was subsequently charged with several crimes, including murder, desecration of remains, stalking, hindering apprehension, and credit card fraud. The trial, which began in November 2019, lasted for 2 months. Prosecutors claimed that Jennifer was killed by Raphael in her apartment during a jealous argument. Raphael's lawyers argued that the state had no concrete evidence to prove their claim, pointing out that there were no signs of a struggle in the apartment and no marks in the bathtub where Jennifer was allegedly dismembered. The prosecution countered that the lack of evidence was, in itself, evidence of a cover-up. The absence of any signs of a crime suggested that Raphael had made a deliberate effort to conceal his tracks. The bathtub, in particular, was found to be remarkably clean, with no DNA or physical evidence linking Jennifer to the scene. The prosecutor pointed out that an ordinary person's bathtub would not be as clean as the one in question. During the trial, Jennifer's mother emotionally addressed the judge, stating that the defendant had destroyed her life and her family. She emphasized that Jennifer was her beloved daughter, and the defendant's actions had left her devastated. After reviewing the case, the judge determined that Raphael was consumed by an obsession with Jennifer. When given the opportunity to speak, Raphael refused, only communicating with his lawyer. In December 2019, the jury deliberated for 3 days before finding Raphael guilty on all charges. The verdict was officially announced in February 2020. As a result, 43-year-old Raphael received the maximum sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 63 years. This means he will be 106 years old before he can be considered for parole. Unfortunately, the remainder of Jennifer's body was never found. Thomas Nelson McNair was born December 2, 1976 in Bozeman, Montana to Clifford McNair and Arleta Berg. Nelson's parents would separate when he was only 5 years old. He was described as a sweet kid who grew up in poverty and raised by a hardworking mother. As a child, he spent a lot of time at Chico Hot Springs in the Bridger Mountain and loved to fish at the lagoon in Sacagawea Park. He did not have a lot of structure in his home and apparently did as he pleased. He was a talented artist who was often sketching and drawing pictures. He went to Park High School in Livingston and often found trouble. When he needed space, he would wander to the overpass or under the I-90 bridge to get high or to draw in one of his notebooks. He and his friends enjoyed grunge, Nirvana, mountain biking, and skateboarding. According to friends of his, the mid-90s, if you were a skateboarder in Livingston, you were viewed as nothing more than rebellious with a dark side. Friends said he frequently used marijuana and may have occasionally taken LSD. In the spring of 1995, Nelson expressed frustration to several friends that he had gone too far down the wrong path. One friend remembers a telephone call with Nelson in which he described his desire to get his life together. He alluded that he had been too far into drug activity, and the friend speculated that Nelson might have been helping transport some stuff. A drug raid took place in Park High School in February 1995 that set in motion a series of events which may have led to his death. During the raid, 22 students were all held in one room for many hours. Nelson was found to be in possession of a marijuana pipe and was later ironically fined for $120 and given a choice to serve 10 days in jail, which would have caused him to lose credit in all of his classes his senior year or become an informant and narc on his friends. 1 month after his arrest, Nelson and another student were publicly disclosed as informants on the front page of the Livingston Enterprise. Alarmed by this, the second individual's family moved away. Strangely, Nelson then disappeared the next month on or about March 29, 1995. That night, he and his friends took turns shooting at empty beer bottles at the town dump with a .22 pistol. Nelson then dropped his friends off at home and his last words were, "I'll pick you up tomorrow for school," and they laughed as they referred to the school as jail, as they often did. He then apparently went home and was never heard from again. Strangely, his room, which he usually padlocked when he would leave the house, was found unlocked. He had also been working as a dishwasher at the Stockman's Bar and bussing tables at a Mexican cafe, where he had plans to work that weekend, but no one from either place had heard from him. At first, his mother, Arleta, who worked graveyard shifts, wasn't alarmed when he went missing. Nothing appeared out of place, and his truck was parked in front of the house as he had left it. Wherever he had gone, he seemingly had gone willingly, either on foot or picked up by someone. After 3 days without contact, his aunt reported him missing on April 1st, and 6 days later, his father filed a second missing persons report. The police arrived at his house and ransacked his room. They would confiscate about 10 marijuana plants growing in his closet. However, a 9mm handgun that he kept in his bedroom was never recovered. Sadly, about a month later, on May 4, 1995, fishermen discovered the 18-year-old's body floating in the Yellowstone River, about 14 miles east of Livingston. He was the victim of an apparent drowning. Sealed from the banks of the river clogged his lungs, an indicator that perhaps he was held face down and had sucked in the particles. Coroner Al Jenkins told the media in 2002 that there was nothing on the body to indicate that Nelson had been stabbed or shot, but a body traveling in the water suffers all sorts of bruises and abrasions. It's also possible that injury may have been inflicted before he went into the water. An article published immediately following his death stated that the initial forensic tests indicate he drowned and that no foul play was involved in his death. But an investigation would continue to try and determine if it was accidental, a suicide, or something else. Nelson was known to be a fantastic swimmer, and his family does not believe that he simply drowned or that he would commit suicide. Missing for 36 days, and then it showed up neatly under a rock. First of all, it was too religious. That wasn't Nelson. Other friends and family also don't believe the note is Nelson's. Apparently, his body was cremated without consent of his parents. Coroner Jenkins affirmed this in 2019 and added that he also had nothing to do with ordering the cremation. Family and friends would scatter his ashes near Livingston Peak in late May of 1995. There was a skateboard park built and named after Nelson in Livingston, but it has since been renamed. As for matters of investigation, Coroner Jenkins says that Nelson McNair's mystery remains an open case, but as of today, it remains unsolved. Jersey Bridgman was born on November 14, 2006, in the small town of Bentonville, Arkansas. When she was 3, her parents welcomed another daughter, but soon after, they decided to get a divorce. Even after the split, Jersey still spent a lot of time with her dad. He eventually remarried and had 2 more girls with his new wife. Since he lived just a short drive away in a nearby town, Jersey would often stay over at their place for a few days before going back to her mom. In 2012, when Jersey was 5, she and her mom moved to a new house in the same town. Jersey and her sister quickly made friends with the neighborhood kids, and her mom's best friend lived only a few yards away. Their families were so close they felt almost like one big extended family, and they spent a lot of time together. On November 19, 2012, less than a week after Jersey's birthday, her mom went to work her usual evening shift at the local supermarket. On nights like this, if her parents weren't available to watch the girls, Jersey's mom would sometimes leave them with her best friend. She didn't mind looking after them, especially since her own kids were friends with Jersey and her sister. That night, Jersey's mom finished her shift around 11:30 p.m., picked up the girls, and took them home to bed. Jersey fell asleep right away, but her younger sister wanted to sleep with her mom, so she took the girl along to her own room. The next morning, Jersey's mom woke up around 6:30 a.m. and went to get her daughter ready for school. But Jersey wasn't in her bedroom. The woman began searching the entire house and realized Jersey was nowhere to be found. Panicking, she called her own mother, telling her she couldn't find Jersey. Her mom suggested that maybe Jersey was playing hide and seek somewhere and told her to check closets and any other places she might fit in. Jersey's mom searched every corner of the house once again but couldn't find her. She looked outside and saw her friend sitting on her front porch. Hoping Jersey might have woken up early and gone over to her house to play, the mother asked if she'd seen her. Since Jersey spent a lot of time at their place, it seemed possible. But her friend hadn't seen Jersey and immediately started helping with the search. They checked around the neighborhood and her friend also looked inside her own house, but there was still no sign of Jersey. At this point, Jersey's mom was in full panic mode and decided to call the police immediately. Officers arrived within minutes and began their own search. They checked the house thoroughly to confirm Jersey wasn't there, then got permission from her friend to look through her house as well. Meanwhile, other officers started searching the nearby streets in case Jersey had somehow wandered off. During the search, they noticed a small vacant house next to Jersey's mother's property. The officers decided to check it, mainly because one of the doors was slightly open. After confirming that no one lived there, they quickly requested a search warrant. Investigators considered the possibility that Jersey might have gone inside, and a judge promptly granted them permission to enter the property. The officers searched each room but found no sign of Jersey until one of them decided to check a closet in the bedroom. What he found was truly horrifying. Inside was Jersey's body, and it only took one look to realize she was no longer alive. Her clothes were missing, and from what they could see, it appeared that the cause of death was strangulation. The body was handed over to medical examiners, and the police began their investigation. When they spoke with Jersey's mom, she mentioned that she left one of the front doors unlocked that night. She explained that she often did this because her boyfriend also worked night shifts and sometimes came by afterward to stay at her place. Since he didn't have a key, leaving the door unlocked meant he wouldn't have to wake her up. She added that he hadn't come over that night, and police immediately began considering him as a potential suspect. Since someone had taken Jersey to the abandoned house, it was likely she knew and trusted this person. Her mom's boyfriend got along well with Jersey and her younger sister. Whenever he was around, he spent a lot of time playing with the girls, and they both trusted him. While investigators looked into his whereabouts that night, they uncovered something else. About a year earlier, Jersey's biological father had faced some serious charges. In December 2011, Jersey was spending time at her father's house with his new wife. During her stay, a friend of the family was visiting, and one day, this person heard a child crying from behind a closed door. Curious and concerned, she opened the bedroom door to check what was going on. What she saw was truly shocking. Jersey was sitting there with a dog collar around her leg tied to a dresser. The room was a mess, cluttered with dirty clothes and other stuff. Horrified, she freed Jersey and immediately reported what she'd seen to the police. Officers quickly arrested Jersey's father and his wife. During questioning, they claimed they'd been tying Jersey up at night for her own safety, saying she'd sometimes sleepwalk and try to grab some medications, or even leave the house in the middle of the night. When asked why they didn't just use child gates, Jersey's father simply replied that they couldn't afford them. However, as the investigation continued, police found out that her father had been using drugs and somehow had enough money to buy them. He also wasn't working, despite the fact that he and his wife were raising 2 other children. Investigators spoke with Jersey, and she revealed the real reason they'd started tying her to the dresser. One night, she had gone into the kitchen and taken a few pieces of pie and some other snacks without permission. To punish the girl, her father and stepmother decided to tie her up. Jersey also told them that sometimes she was forced to sleep on the floor in the bedroom without even being allowed to use the bathroom. In the end, Jersey's father was sentenced to 18 years, and his wife received 12 years behind bars. Since then, Jersey had been living with her mother, who had no idea about all of this as Jersey had been too afraid to tell anyone. This story, for obvious reasons, caught the detectives' attention, but they quickly established that Jersey's father couldn't have been involved, as he had been in prison since his arrest and would not have been able to be at his daughter's home that night. Investigators then turned their attention to all known sex offenders living within a few miles. Each one provided an alibi, leading the police to focus on people in Jersey's close circle. Around this time, the medical examiners completed a preliminary report confirming that the cause of death was strangulation. They also found evidence of SA and collected biological material from the perpetrator. This sample was sent to the lab for DNA analysis. While detectives turned their attention to Jersey's mother's boyfriend, he claimed that he'd been working at a store that night and his shift didn't end until early in the morning. Police reviewed the store's CCTV footage, which backed up his claim. However, there was one problem. Detectives found that he had a break during his shift. Theoretically, he could have committed the crime, as the store was only a few minutes away from Jersey's home. But his coworkers told the police that he hadn't left the store during his break, so detectives eventually ruled him out as a suspect. While speaking with the police, the boyfriend mentioned an interesting detail. Around 3 a.m., a man named Zachary, Jersey's mother's neighbor and the husband of her best friend, had come into the store. Zachary said he had stomach pains, bought some medicine, and left. Given that the crime seemed to have been committed around this time, police found this account quite suspicious. They had already spoken to Zachary and his wife and had searched their home but didn't find any evidence. Initially, Zachary hadn't raised any suspicions, but with this new information about his late-night trip, detectives decided to question him again. Zachary confirmed that he did wake up in the middle of the night with stomach pain, and not finding any medication at home, he headed to a store just a few hundred yards away. When he got back, he eventually fell asleep again, and woke up around 6:30 a.m. to get his older son ready for school. He also willingly provided police with his fingerprints, a DNA sample, and the clothes he wore to the store that night. Zachary insisted he would never harm Jersey, and the detectives believed he was telling the truth. While awaiting the DNA test results, the police decided to dig deeper into Zachary's background and uncovered a few intriguing details. First, they found that he had an extensive criminal record, though it was mainly for non-violent, relatively minor offenses. Zachary also had a troubled past. Police learned that he had suffered various forms of abuse over the years from his family members, including his stepfather, biological mother, and brother. 13 reports had been filed by concerned people who noticed the abuse and wanted to help. It's unclear if the police ever took action. Detectives then spoke with Jersey's mother to learn more about Zachary. She shared that he and his wife often helped look after the kids, and he got along great with them. Jersey and her sister even called him Uncle Zach. He was practically family. The girls visited his house almost daily. The mother also mentioned that both Zachary and his wife had keys to her home, since Jersey seemed to trust Zachary completely and would have followed him anywhere without question. Detectives began to consider he might be involved. They also grew suspicious of his late-night store visit, thinking it could have been a calculated move to create an alibi with witnesses and CCTV footage. When detectives brought Zachary in for another interview, he suddenly said he wouldn't talk without his lawyer. This shift caught investigators off guard, especially since he'd been fully cooperative just recently, doing everything they'd asked. With no solid evidence against Zachary, all the investigators could do was wait for the DNA test results and keep searching for new leads. But then, out of nowhere, came an unexpected twist. Despite his initial refusal, Zachary called the police, saying he was now willing to take a polygraph test to clear his name. Detectives immediately set everything up, but the results weren't in Zachary's favor. The polygraph operator determined that many of his responses showed signs of deception. This only deepened detectives' suspicions, but they still needed concrete evidence. They also discovered that Zachary's decision to take the polygraph test was prompted by his wife, who had apparently started to doubt his honesty. It turned out she warned him that if he refused to cooperate with the police, she would take the children and leave him. So, this sudden change wasn't really about Zachary trying to clear his name after all. Soon after failing the polygraph, Zachary took another suspicious step. He posted on social media saying he had made a huge mistake that would ruin his life. To detectives, this seemed like further confirmation of his guilt, yet they still needed some solid proof to move forward. The lab results came back on November 26th, 6 days after the murder. This was also the day of Jersey's funeral, and Zachary, along with his wife, planned to attend it. Forensic experts had extracted a DNA profile from the biological material found on the victim's body and analyzed all of Zachary's clothing. The results didn't surprise detectives. Nearly all of Zachary's clothes contained traces of Jersey's DNA, and the biological material on her body matched his DNA as well. With this crucial evidence, detectives obtained a warrant for his arrest and detained him right outside the church, just as the ceremony was about to begin. During the interrogation, Zachary continued to deny his involvement, saying he had nothing to do with it. But when detectives told him about the lab results, he ultimately confessed to the crime. According to his story, Zachary really did wake up with a stomach ache that night and went looking for medicine but couldn't find any at home. So he decided to drop by Jersey's mom's place. For him and his wife, this wasn't unusual. They would often stop by to borrow medicine from her cabinet. Besides, Zachary knew she usually left one of the doors unlocked, so he wouldn't even need to wake her up. Once inside, he noticed that Jersey's bedroom door was slightly open and decided to go in. According to Zachary, he had no clear motive and insisted he didn't understand why he went in there. He woke Jersey up and asked her to come with him. Trusting him like family, Jersey didn't hesitate and followed. Zachary led her to an abandoned house nearby, where he committed his monstrous crime and left her body in a closet. Afterward, he walked to a store, bought some stomach medicine, and went home, where he was able to fall asleep without a care. The next morning, he joined the search for Jersey as if nothing had happened, pretending he was just worried and eager to help find her. Zachary also claimed he hadn't planned the crime and said it all happened on impulse, though detectives had doubts about that. Still, they had no reason to question the rest of his confession. He provided many highly accurate details that hadn't been made public. At that point, the police had kept almost all information under wraps, even from Jersey's mother, so there was no way Zachary could have known those specifics otherwise. In the end, he was charged with murder and held in jail awaiting trial. The prosecution announced they would seek the death penalty. As for his attorney, he didn't even try to argue Zachary's innocence. Given the confession and overwhelming evidence, it seemed like a lost cause. Instead, his focus was on getting a life sentence instead of the death penalty. It's worth mentioning that soon after Zachary was put in jail, another inmate attacked him. He wasn't seriously injured though, and since then, he's been under increased protection. The trial began in the spring of 2015, 2.5 years after the murder. Since Zachary never recanted his confession, proceedings moved very quickly. He was found guilty and sentenced to death, with 2 additional life sentences and an extra 20 years. Before the sentencing, Zachary spoke to Jersey's family, expressing deep regret for what he'd done and hoping they might one day forgive him. However, his apology didn't seem to have much effect on them. As often happens, executions are almost always delayed for many years, and Zachary's case was no exception. He made several attempts to appeal his sentence, initially claiming that his first lawyer hadn't even tried to exclude certain pieces of evidence and that the jury selection process had been flawed. His new attorney also argued that Zachary suffered from severe mental health issues and developmental delays. They claimed his mental capacity was equivalent to that of an 8-year-old, meaning he shouldn't be held fully responsible for his actions. Interestingly, even Zachary's own mother, who had mistreated him for years, came forward in his defense. In an interview, she said she still loved her son and hoped his lawyers could overturn his sentence. Zachary's wife, who was also the best friend of Jersey's mother, supported his appeal as well, even though she had previously condemned his actions. But despite these efforts, the appeal was denied. Independent experts concluded that, while Zachary did show developmental challenges, he was fully capable of understanding his actions and knew he was committing a serious crime. Currently, Zachary remains in prison, still trying to appeal his sentence. The last developments in his case were in early 2024, but his lawyers have yet to convince the court to overturn the death penalty, and it seems unlikely that the situation will ever change. As for Jersey's mother, she eventually married the man she was dating at the time of the tragedy, and they had a daughter together. She regrets that this little girl will never get to know Jersey or experience what a wonderful older sister she could have been. 23-year-old Krista Bromlett was residing in a mobile home in New Providence, Tennessee in 1996. New Providence, which was formerly a small railroad community, was taken over by the nearby community of Clarksville. New Providence saw rising crime rates over the ensuing years, including an increase in drug-related offenses and commercial burglaries. Krista Bromlett regrettably fell victim to these problems. Her case remained cold until after 22 years when her killer was finally arrested. Krista Bromlett was born in 1973 in California to Jim Langley and Kim Venable. Krista was renowned for being witty, compassionate, and smart. Despite having a tight-knit relationship with her family, she made the decision to be financially independent and started living alone. She and her mother had shared a home together in Clarksville until in 1995, when her mother moved to Corpus Christi, Texas with Krista's 2 young children. Krista wanted to stay back because she hoped to finish her GED program in Clarksville. She then lived alone in a mobile home while pursuing her high school equivalency so she could provide a better life for her 2 kids. Although her family described her as warm and loving, her neighbor thought she was distant. In the afternoon of October 28, 1996, Krista Bromlett's landlord, Jeff Pennington, knocked on the door of her trailer in the Sunnydale Mobile Home Park just off Peachers Mill Road. The landlord wanted to discuss with Krista about a recent fire outbreak that occurred a week before, but she never responded. Jeff, however, later discovered something terrible while attempting to contact Krista. In the living room, he saw the shoeless body of Krista Bromlett laying in the flickering glow of a small colored television. A terrified Jeff Pennington said, "Then I called the police." Police in Clarksville, Tennessee were looking into several home killings of women at the time of Krista's murder. Police insisted that the murders had nothing to do with this particle case. When Krista passed away, the Montgomery County Medical Examiner performed an autopsy on her, and the Clarksville Police Department Crime Scene Unit processed the mobile home, looking for any available evidence to pinpoint the killer. According to the autopsy, Krista Bromlett died by suffocation and a rape kit revealed signs of sexual assault. The forensics sent their DNA findings from the rape kit to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's lab, who then loaded the data from that kit into Cody's in the hopes of finding a match. About 6 detectives began the investigation by interviewing between 50 and 60 neighbors in an effort to identify potential witnesses. A neighbor claimed to have seen Krista on the 27th of October 1996, sitting on her porch as she always did. But Krista had a distant demeanor, and people typically left her alone. Police expected to make an arrest within a week after receiving nearly a dozen tips, but the leads fizzled out. No potential suspects were located, and the years passed without an arrest. Detective Michael Ure of the Clarksville Police Department did not receive the news he so wanted until after 22 years in February 13, 2019. It happened that the DNA of the suspect from Krista's rape kit had eventually matched a suspect who was located in Phoenix, Arizona. The DNA on Cody's matched to a 48-year-old man named Kenneth Hudspeth. Detective Michael Ulrey stated that Hudspeth hadn't been mentioned in the investigation up to this point, and no one had noticed him. When Detective Ulrey spoke with the suspect in April, he learned that Hudspeth had indeed lived in the Clarksville at the time of Krista's murder and had left the city in December 1997. Hudspeth didn't deny all the facts presented to him. He claimed to be a friend of Krista, and he allegedly acknowledged being the last person to see her alive. Hudspeth was taken into custody and charged with homicide as a result of the DNA evidence in this interview. He was transferred to Tennessee to await trial after waiving extradition. Investigators learned from Hudspeth's arrest records that he had been detained on multiple occasions for offenses like domestic assault and felony assault. He has served time in jails in Texas and Arizona. His DNA should have been in Cody's years ago, but investigators think the evidence chain of custody may have resulted in lost or ruined swabs. Hudspeth asserted that he had previously done drugs with Krista Bromlett while residing in Clarksville's Sunnydale Mobile Home Park. These allegations were refuted by Krista Bromlett's toxicology report, which revealed a low blood alcohol content. When asked if he had sex with her, he initially denied it, but after seeing the autopsy results and the DNA found inside Bromlett and on her bra, he admitted that he had been so high that he couldn't recall whether or not he had sex with her. "I was on bad dope. Know her. Did I have sex with her? I don't remember that," Hudspeth said in the courtroom. "I just don't see myself raping and killing this woman. I hope I didn't," he said again. As soon as there was a break in the case, Krista Bromlett's family members were informed. "I knew all along that it was just a matter of time. There was never a doubt in our minds that they'd find who had done it," Krista's grandmother said. Finally, after long, painful 22 years, in January 2022, 52-year-old Kenneth Hudspeth was found guilty by the judge and was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Krista Bromlett.